everyone, it's Nyla here at Communikarma, talking to people that are involved in issues that matter in society and some of the issues that should matter. And today, as you can see, I'm outside. We're going to be talking to Felipe Molina, who's a local food activist in South Birmingham, who is working with local communities to address some issues around food sustainability, food security, and bringing communities together. So first of all, let me introduce you to Felipe. So welcome, Felipe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to Kushinga. Really looking forward to having a look round, which you've kindly offered to show me around. And it is a little bit grey today.
It is, yes.
And I believe that we are in a lot of trains.
We've just got trains right behind here, so yeah.
But we're in a period called the Hunger Gap.
Hungry Gap, yes.
Hungry Gap.
Yes.
Nothing to do with the Hunger Games.
No, right.
Yeah, okay. So
not yet.
the Hungry Gap, what is that?
So Hungry Gap is used to describe the time of the year, which is around kind of mid to late February, kind of like late winter to early spring, where there's not a lot growing.
Right.
So basically, if you've got your own allotment, and you live off your allotment produce, then that's a bit where, supposedly it's you go a bit hungrier because there's not a huge amount. And the way I learned about the Hungry Gap was learning about crops, particularly that grow during the Hungry Gap.
Right.
So that, for example, there's one called it's called Russian Hungry Gap Kale.
Okay, and I think we're going to be looking at some of this.
Yes,
in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is to think about the diversity of crops that you can grow in order to fill those gaps as well, because there's a huge amount out there that you can explore, you can grow and kind of have fun with.
Brilliant. Well, that gives us a clue as to the sort of ethos that you're growing here with. It's a small area, but there's a lot here. So let's make a start at looking at it, Felipe.
Great.
So Felipe, just talk me through what's in Kushinga Gardens.
Yeah. So I'll give you just like a brief background about Kushinga. So we're a community garden. And basically what we do is we work with, and as very much as part of the team, is people who are asylum seekers and refugees and migrants, and as well as working with local people, local gardeners, people with disabilities, people with mental health problems. And what the core thing, obviously, apart from growing food, is creating a community of people, sometimes almost like a bit of a family of people that look out for one another. We socialise, do a lot of the social aspect that is really important.
Yes.
But one of the big things is obviously that people can get involved in growing and go home with a lot of food that they've grown themselves with other people.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the value that food can have in bringing people together, both to grow but also to cook food. So people might cook some of their traditional dishes. That's also reflected in the diversity of crops that we grow.
Brilliant. Okay, so what have we got growing here at the moment?
So you have to
I know we're in these hungry gaps.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, yeah. And there's not, so you can see there's not a huge amount growing, but we've got our kind of usual stuff. I mean, we have, it's mostly organic is our approach. So we use things like crop rotation. So some years where we grew, for example, carrots, we had our root crops here last year. And then we're going to be shifting that to another kind of bed in order to fit the rotation element.
Okay.
But along with that, also we're also growing a lot of so exotic crops. So like I say, like the crops that people might have grown from back home.
Okay.
So for example, here you can see the stubs of these two beds last year were mostly a plant called huckleberry. So one of our coordinators, he's from Cameroon,
right,
and he's involved back home in a lot of farming and does a lot of supports a lot of farmers now across Africa. So he's one of our coordinators, and he kind of is interested in again bringing kind of exotic crops and seeing what we can grow here.
Right.
And some of the crops, even though they might be exotic, they're also very can be very resilient.
Yeah.
And also extremely nutritious as well.
So
it's almost.
How would a crop that's grown in Cameroon, how would that do in the British climate?
So it kind of varies a lot. So some of them do very well outside, some of them kind of struggle. We've got our polytunnel, we're hoping to get another polytunnel as well to grow some of these other things. And part of it is also experimenting, and it's been really interesting kind of working with farmers from other countries, from some of them very, very hot countries, because obviously people have, probably a huge, ridiculous amount more knowledge than I do. But then obviously they come here maybe with less awareness of the intricacies and the kind of specifics of growing in this country.
Yeah, for sure.
Which whereas in Africa you can just get seeds and just, you know, pumpkin seeds, just spread them across.
Yeah.
And with the rain and a lot of sun and hugely fertile soil, suddenly you just get, you know, crops growing everywhere. Here, obviously, you've got to, you know, look after your seedlings, harden them off, do all the stuff. And it's basically working with people, teaching them how to do that, but then also learning some really valuable information, skills, and wisdom about plants.
Yeah, it's like cross-fertilization of knowledge.
Yes,
if I may use an analogy here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of work, and I think that's what I love about Birmingham as well, because it's so diverse. You know, I've picked up some really interesting knowledge, like medicinal herb knowledge about, you know, common kitchen plants or common kitchen ingredients, or things like they do in Africa or India that are very kind of unique that people here would know. Or, you know, for example, I've learned here that pumpkins, for example, for many years you grow pumpkins, and you got all this effort to grow pumpkins just for 1 or 2 or 3 pumpkins, and then, but yeah, I didn't know that you can eat the leaves, for example. No, the leaves are, then I was taught how to cook the leaves and how to make really nice dishes, and then almost like our kind of parameters really open up widely based on these new things that we learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're growing, obviously, like I said, like a lot of different exotic crops. We're doing a lot of obviously introducing people to a lot of the local stuff as well. People, obviously, there's a universal like spuds, very popular. We've grown a load of you know, beans, potatoes. Here last year we had a method called it's a shame I can't really show you. It's called the Three Sisters method.
Okay, is that under the blue tarpaulin?
This is where we grew it last year. So
right.
Three Sisters is basically a way of growing companion planting where you combine 3 crops, so beans, squash, and
another one.
And sweet corn.
Okay.
Yeah, and sweet corn.
Yeah.
And the idea is that they're 3 sisters because they support one another.
Yeah.
So the sweet corn will provide the structure for the beans to climb up.
Oh, right.
The beans will fix the nitrogen, so help with the fertility for the other plants.
Yeah.
And the squash will provide a ground cover to keep the weeds down and keep moisture in. So you create almost a symbiotic relationship between the plants.
That sounds so practical.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and you get so much variety as well from the food that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's good use of space. And also, again, it's because that is traditionally it was a Native American practice.
Yeah.
But then also we found out from Eric, he's kind of familiar with it in Africa as well.
Yeah.
So again, it's all lots of these kind of really interesting kind of older kind of wisdoms that people bring that can get passed on.
Amazing. That's such a brilliant, comprehensive approach to this community project, Felipe. Is that a polytunnel I see behind you?
Yes. So what I'll show you first. I mean, just to warn you, there's not a lot grown in there. Obviously, like being in the middle of winter. But yes, one of the things I was going to show you about the polytunnel is one of the things here that when we first set up the garden, we created what was known as permaculture. I don't know if you know about permaculture. So permaculture is essentially a method of design that's used to create sustainable systems by using a lot of our knowledge and observations of nature. So I know it sounds a bit abstract, but so here, for example, we after about a year of kind of observing and seeing what the land had to offer, we created designs that were kind of sustainable. And there's a lot of things that are practices that make things maybe kind of less input and more sustainable.
Right.
So for example, I'll show you in a bit, we have our compost toilet, for example. That's a typical permaculture type thing.
Yeah.
It's not just permaculture does it, but again, for a sustainable kind of system. So any of the waste product from the toilet then goes back into the land.
Right.
Basically, what I'll explain, just the background to the polytunnel is, when one of the things that we observed when we first came on this land, it was just pure lawn, and there was nothing else. It's just lawn. It used to be garages many years ago. Right. But basically, when you dug about that much of soil underneath it was just pure rubble.
Right.
And we had, I mean, back in the day, this is about 13 years ago, I was still kind of fairly new to gardening, and we had this kind of supposed expert gardener who was going to come and help us, and he just looked, he dug a bit of the soil, and there's no soil, just a bit of that, and it's just rubble, and it almost, my sense from him, it's a bit of a write-off.
Right.
You know, there's no point having this land, you know, it's not worth growing. And I think for my kind of stubbornness helped, my lack of like gardening, the gardening knowledge back then, and my stubbornnness helped. I thought, you know, we're just going to give it a go. It is a good location. It's a really lovely space. And basically what we did over the many years is that we did a practice called double digging. So basically, because we on average would get about 15 people, like really keen people, mostly refugees and asylum seekers, people who just had a lot of fun here, really came together and
Yeah.
really, really solid hard workers.
Yeah.
So what we started doing is that we went through different areas and started removing the rubble,
Right.
and then replacing it with manure.
Oh, right.
And basically that space is a method called double digging, and you don't, it's not that you do it all the time. We've only done it once,
Yeah.
and it's basically helped the fertility. And for many years we had some most incredible amount of food grown because we replaced the soil. We took the rubble out and put the manure in.
Yeah.
At the deeper level of
the rubble.
of the rubble.
Great.
And basically what we did that, and again, the idea of permaculture and a lot of these practices is that like what might be a waste product from one system,
Yeah.
or one part of a system, can then feed another part of the system. So you create a cyclical.
That's
so basically
great.
what we did here, which is on my next section.
Yeah. I can see actually that halfway down the Polytunnel, there is a
So guttering.
something happening there. Yeah.
So basically, the idea is that this is again like thinking about what we can learn from other cultures. So I actually learned this from the Permaculture magazine many years ago, where they talked about a self-watering polytunnel, self-watering greenhouse that was modelled on the ancient Incas gardening, which they did up in the Andes in South America. And basically, what you do is that the rainwater comes here, you collect it, and it goes into a pipe here.
Right.
So it comes in here, and then you collect it into the pipe.
Oh yeah, there it is.
And then the pipe goes into here, into underneath, and I'll show you. So then basically it goes underneath the polytunnel. If you imagine underneath the shape of the whole polytunnel, if you imagine it's like basically a pond, a huge pond that comes like that down.
So can we see a little bit of, I think that we saw earlier, that there's some concrete slabs, and then directly under there is the little stream of water that's collected. I don't know if it's a stream.
Yeah,
it's
it's like it's like a pond essentially. So basically, if you imagine what we did is that we created a sump. So like we hollowed out a huge area underneath the polytunnel.
Yeah.
We put carpet down. We basically created the pond. So we put pond lining.
Yeah.
So carpet, pond lining. And then basically on top of that, what we did is that we put breeze blocks basically to mark out the path.
Right.
And to separate the path from the raised bed.
Yeah.
And amongst the raised bed, that's where we got all the rubble that we got from underneath the garden. So, and that's a huge amount of rubble that we cleared from the garden that was just, not really allowing us to grow much.
Yeah.
And we use that as a resource. And the idea is that it goes under the raised bed.
Yeah.
And that's where all the water sits. So the water gets harvested from the pipe, sits amongst the rubble. And then on top of the rubble, so there's probably that much rubble, and then on top of that, it's another layer of topsoil, maybe about 1.5 foot of topsoil.
Okay.
So basically here, you can see there's a dampness in.
Yeah, it's still, this is obviously enclosed, but it doesn't look bone dry or anything.
No, and you can see here, for example, this. I mean, it's amazing. Like in the middle of summer, you can have, we're having to struggle to water things outside. But we don't even have to come in here to water. Right. Even though it's obviously actually baking hot and it's just really drying up. Even though the soil looks quite dry, it's fair. It's not too dry, but basically if you go under, then that's where the moisture is. And plants like these in the middle of the winter and in the middle of the summer when we're not watering, these plants are kind of really thriving, and that's why.
What are those plants, Felipe?
Yeah, so this is basically this is one of my all-time favourite plants. I was saying earlier about the hungry gap thing. So a lot of kale, even though there is a variety of kale called Russian hungry gap kale, a lot of kales do well during this kind of hungry gap. So we've got curly kale, and this one, which is my favourite plant, which relates to another project called the Mother Gardens, is basically this is African kale, also known as koval, and it's a lot of our members, particularly many people from Africa and from Zimbabwe particularly, they're very keen on this plant.
Okay, well let's have a closer look at it.
Yeah.
So the curly, there's a curly plant there.
That's the curly kale, yeah.
And this is
African kale.
Right.
African kale.
Okay.
And this is basically a really popular. It's really hardy. So even though we're growing it in here, part of it is because sometimes the birds eat it. That's the only thing is like a lot of brassicas, like birds like to kind of strip them, particularly in the winter when there's not much else growing. So we have them in here as well as almost as a stock plant.
It's looking fine.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
very
But
nice.
the good thing is it's also very hardy.
Yeah.
So even though it's African, it's kind of exotic. Some years, for example, literally in the middle of winter, when there's just snow and nothing else, I used to still come out here and harvest of the African kale because it's still growing. And obviously, so it's kind of evergreen, so all year round, and obviously it's perennial, so that means that it will be here for many, many years. And one of the things I'm particularly really interested in, as well as growing a lot of kind of exotic, diverse crops, is also growing perennial crops that you don't really have to do a lot once you plant it. A bit like, fruit trees, for example.
Perpetual spinach.
Perpetual spinach can last over a year, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's perennial.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I remember growing that when I was a child. That's the only reason I've mentioned
Oh,
it.
okay. No, but it's great. But I think spinach is a great one to grow because, like, it's perpetual, so you don't. It's not one harvest. You're always kind of harvesting for a year and a half or so.
It's so good for you.
It's so good for you, and a lot of pests don't like it. They're not bothered by it, which is a really valuable thing. And it's almost, again, the more you learn about a wider range of plants, you can then start finding the ones that you've got less effort. If you haven't got a lot of time, my allotment, for example, is mostly perennial, and I just let stuff do their own thing.
Low maintenance.
Yes, exactly, low maintenance. Yeah. But so with perennial kale, one of the things worth mentioning is also really, really easy to propagate.
Right.
So, for example,
You're
here.
going to show me how to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, you see how these shoots, you take that off, and then you like you do cutting. So it's basically doing cuttings like you do, any cutting. You take off all the top leaves and leave maybe a couple at the top.
Yeah.
But as opposed to other root cuttings that you do where you've got to do the hormone powder and all the rest.
So what do you do? Just bung that in the ground?
Yeah, just literally bung it in the ground.
Brilliant.
And then, the idea is that traditionally they would just really strip this off. They would use this as food. Generally, the food that they would use is a lot bigger, but this is quite nice and fresh and quite tender as well.
Yeah,
nice.
It's looking really healthy. Oh, can I have a little taste?
Yeah, and it's really nice as a salad. A lot of people cook with it, but I like it as a salad, obviously, to keep all the nutrients in it.
It's so fresh tasting.
Yeah.
It's got that organic taste that, when you have plants that are grown organically as opposed to
yes, absolutely.
commercially.
Yeah, it tastes a lot stronger.
I don't know how to describe it, but it's just more earthy and
yeah. Absolutely.
Right, great. Well, what's the next on our little tour?
I'll show you. Let's have a look. Again, this is an example of the African kale is a bit out of shape at the moment, but you see all those, we put them late last year. This is the African kale here. This is basically our brassica bed.
Right. I can see some sprouts. Are they sprouts?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So
they're unmistakably sprouts, I think.
Yes, yeah. Those were the ones that we were still left that we hadn't harvested. But we've grown different brassica, and obviously with brassicas, you have to keep them in a cage because the birds get to them.
Okay.
And also the cabbage white butterfly.
Right.
And this is basically an old cheap polytunnel that we got, and now we just use a frame. It's seen better days, but it does a job.
I think it's perfect for the job, actually.
So I don't know if you can see over there, all those kind of smaller plants there. That's basically the African kale that we did like I just showed you. We just put them in the ground, and then you get new plants.
Right, and they've grown really well.
Yeah.
And is this a cherry? What's this?
This is an apricot.
Oh, apricot.
And what I need to do is we've got 2 apricots, and for many, many years there's been an issue around pollination. And what I'm going to experiment this year with is basically hand pollinating. And part of the problem is also with, obviously, this is it's mid February, and this is already kind of flowering. And the problem is that if you get some fruit trees that flower too early, then they get affected by the late frosts.
Yeah,
I mean, even now it's not even late frost; it's just like a frost.
Yeah.
So that's why they're quite vulnerable. So basically, what I want to do this year is to start thinking about hand pollinating, just so then things can get pollinated.
Right.
Because there is an issue about pollination at the moment. We do get a lot of sort of pests here. So even our apples get pinched by the squirrels, which is really annoying. I've never known squirrels pinch apples in other places, but here they just strip everything. So yes, we've got 2 apricots. Here again, we did this many years ago. This is called a herb spiral. You can't see much of the spiral at the moment, but it's another useful kind of permaculture method or technique where you basically create the shape of a spiral, and the spiral goes up.
Right.
So
Can you point out where the spiral is?
So basically, the spiral starts here, by the pond, and it curves round, and the idea is that curves up. So here, I don't know if you can see the brickwork. So it's kind of changed over many years.
Just about, actually, yeah.
So the idea is that the higher the ground will create a specific microclimate where it's kind of a lot drier.
Right.
And then you put, like on the top, for example, you put your Mediterranean herbs like your sage and rosemary.
Okay.
And as it curls round, you'll have things that are more suitable. So less. We have here kind of marjoram, for example, and oregano
Is that
at the
sage?
front.
What's that?
That's sage and that's rosemary.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's rosemary.
And then as you come round here, I'm not sure if we did have lemon balm and mint, but I'm not sure where it's gone. But yeah, so the idea is that on the north side and the lower side, which will get shadier, then you'll have things like mint and lemon balm because they prefer the shade and prefer moisture ground.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, you don't have to have a pond at the end of your herb spiral.
Yeah, it's a nice pond actually, isn't it? That. Is it an old bath or something?
Yes, one of those jacuzzi type baths. Really but even there, we have had. Oh, you can't see at the moment. We've got like edible pond plants.
Okay.
So the idea is to make as many places edible as possible. So there's a pond plant called arrow leaf, Chinese arrow leaf. Right. Which you get these really lovely kind of like a little tubers like that. They float to the top, and you can roast them.
Yeah. Great.
So apart from that, we've grown a lot of, Justa berries and chokeberries and black currants and red currants. We're looking at some point at caging all of that because the birds, again, they tend to strip the bushes of the Okay,
so let's go and look over here.
If you what I'll talk to you about at the moment, the other thing, the practice that we do is around kind of biochar. So we have something called a biochar rocket stove, which we got it many years ago. Basically, biochar is essentially the byproduct of burning fuel with no oxygen. So I'll show you, that makes it easier.
Yeah. So this is something you've made.
This is
made from. Oh, there it is.
Basically, we've got it made. We kind of linked with it as a farmer in a local organic farmer in Wales, and he was a friend of mine was working with him, and he basically was really keen on promoting the idea of biochar. So biochar a few years ago was hailed as a potential miracle. So basically, biochar is essentially like charcoal. And it's the byproduct of burning within a certain system. It could be a rocket stove, but there's other methods of doing it in tin cans as well. And and the idea is that you end up with the product called biochar, which is a byproduct of burning other fuel. And the idea is that it will rather than giving off when it burns, rather than giving off the carbon into the atmosphere, it stays within the biochar itself in the charcoal.
Right.
And the idea is that you then bury that into the ground, and the idea is that you will trap carbon into the ground.
Right. So you don't burn it or anything, it's just buried.
It's just buried, yes, yeah. And so many years ago it was kind of hailed as one of the kind of potential solutions to climate change, if done on a mass scale, obviously. So basically, and the idea is what attracted me to it as well was the fact that you can potentially create almost like a cyclical system where you sort of grow food or bury it into the ground and grow trees on it, and then use the trees, you coppice the trees, and then you burn it in order to create more biochar.
Yeah.
But whilst also trapping carbon into the ground.
And why is it kind of quieting down around that? Is it not become popular because of a particular reason?
I'm not entirely sure. I know I've about a month ago I heard of a couple of projects, but I'm not sure why. I don't know, maybe if like the scaling of it was an issue. There was an interesting film from America where they were kind of hailing it, and they had like this huge biochar kind of plant where they were kind of creating it. But I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
But the other really beneficial thing about it is it's really useful for purifying water as well.
Right.
So here, for example, we've got an issue with water. We've got no running tap water. So we're going to get a lot more structures at the moment where we can harvest rainwater. But obviously we'll be able to purify it to the point of rainwater being good for drinking, but at least to purify it for hand washing, for example, or for washing up.
Yeah.
Or then to use our washing up water going through a system through the biochar to clean that, which can then be used for for irrigation, for example.
No. So, and this is I'll just show the
Yes.
gadget again, or
Yeah.
it's like basically a steel pipe by the looks of it, like a drum.
So it was, I think it's a reclaimed like gas thing, which basically you can see how, the idea is like a rocket stove is a thing anyway, and this is called a biochar rocket stove. The idea is that it has like quite a narrow chute where this flame comes up, and that's why it's kind of like rocket, because it can be quite intense heat as it comes up. And you feed the wood in there.
It'd be great to see this in action, actually. But maybe obviously not today. But
yes, we'll have to invite
I'll come back when
you. Yes, exactly. Well, we were using it to keep warm and to cook food as it was getting really cold towards the end of the season last year. And it was great. And the idea, basically, you see all this here. This is the outer chamber that you fill with wood chip. So the wood chip is basically what turns into the biochar eventually. It's not really burnt directly by the flame, but basically the heat, the intense heat that comes through the middle, means that all the outer kind of layer, outer chamber, burns all the wood chip into biochar, and that's where we end up with that.
Well, thanks for showing us that, because I don't think that's very commonly known, Felipe.
No, and I think that's the thing. One of the things that I'm really interested in doing at Kushinga Garden is almost having it as a space where we can demonstrate different practices. Yeah, so one of the things that we had in mind that we want to do here more, and that we have been doing, is when we think about because obviously a lot of the focus of our project here is very much around supporting migrant communities, asylum seeker and refugee communities. But also part of that is part of the benefit that people can have, that we can have by being here, is also the benefit that we can have on wider communities, on Birmingham projects, on our network of food projects, of sustainability projects that we're part of. So part of that is very much about sharing exotic, for example, through another project I'll talk about in a minute, the Mother Gardens, we've managed to share hundreds and hundreds of the African Kale plants across the city to people. The other thing is demonstrating, people might not know about compost toilets, people might not know about self-watering systems, about exotic crops. And it's almost thinking about all these kind of these practices that will, and maybe they already are very, very important, but will become really essential in terms of how we can be more live sustainably, but also how we can kind of survive potential crises around food security, of access to food, all the rest. But it's basically what people here can do also for other people, and like that knowledge, that richness of knowledge, of diversity, how that can impact on our communities, and it's like a mutual exchange. It's not a thing of which, and there is a lot of, and it's great where people welcome other people from other cultures, and they that's what I love about Birmingham. There's so many amazing projects of mutual aid, of people welcoming refugees and other people from other parts of the world. But here it's kind of part of that, but it's also the other bit is people, refugees and migrant new communities welcoming local people and benefiting kind of local people as well. So it's like a symbiotic thing. Absolutely.
Well, we'll talk about that in more detail shortly, as you said, Felipe. But let's go to our next stops, and I know that you mentioned the composting toilet, but between us and the composting toilet, there's something else which was over here.
So here basically we have this is like a bit of a chill out sitting space. Again, it's not, you can't see a lot, there's not a huge amount growing, but we've got a fig tree, and again part of it is growing things that wouldn't necessarily grow that well in this country, but maybe thinking kind of long term about what will be growing better. So this fig tree is a particular fig tree which is called brown turkey. It's like a variety of a fig. A lot of figs that you grow, if you grow them in this country, they don't do so well because you haven't got long enough summers or hot enough summers. But this variety called brown turkey is the only one that I know of that does actually quite well.
The figs look really healthy as well. I mean, I don't know the growing season for figs, but there's some out and there's some on the tree at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, some of them will ripen, some of them will just kind of fall off, and then you get another harvest, load coming in kind of around September time. But that's just so beautiful. They're so nice.
Yeah, and so delicious.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's time for the pièce de résistance of the composting toilet.
The compost toilet, yeah. So we've got, so the idea of a compost toilet is basically any waste product when you go to the toilet goes either into two chambers. It will go, your number ones will go into like a big tub, which we'll then use and go onto our compost.
Yeah.
To help kind of rot down, and then your number twos will go into a big wheelie bin. And the idea is of the so basically there's no water. No.
It's not like a long drop toilet then, Felipe. We're going to have a peek inside.
Before you film, can I?
Yeah, clean it up. I've been in composting toilets before, and they can be a bit.
Right.
Yeah. Is it decent?
Hold on. Just wood chip everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Cobwebs.
This is a real education actually, going around here.
Yeah.
You can definitely run tours round similar things.
So we do open days here from time to time as part, almost like an outreach and celebratory thing. I'm not sure if that's decent
Okay,
enough.
no, that is decent.
Okay.
Because we're not going to peer down the bowl or anything. But yeah, so if you, so this is the inside of the composting toilet, which is looking very smart actually.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that are kind of smarter. This is fairly basic. And basically, yes, underneath there sits the wheelie bin. And the idea is, I'll show you, is in order, which is absolutely amazing, you kind of wonder how it happens. In order for when you do your number two, that doesn't smell, you use wood shavings.
Right. Okay.
And basically, you do your business.
Yes.
You put like a handful of this on it, and literally no smell. It's amazing how it does it.
Yeah. There's no smell. I can reassure everyone.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'd be worried if there was, because we haven't been in there for a while. So, so yeah, and obviously this helps kind of things rot down as well. And then after that, and it's amazing, within 6 months, like maybe between 6 months and 9 months, then you just end up with just really beautiful compost.
Yeah. Okay.
It's generally quite too rich that you wouldn't want to use it on directly on your vegetables, but it's really good for fruit trees, for example.
Right. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Well. Thanks so much, Felipe. When you emerge, we'll have a seat and we'll talk about food security and the other work that you're doing in the Mother Gardens project that you mentioned there. So, see you in a bit.
Great.
So here we are in the cosy little corner area, Felipe, and thank you so much for showing me around. And we're going to now be talking about the broader issue of food security, which is why you're here and doing this fantastic work. So why is it so important right now to be involved in food sustainability and food security?
I think for me it's kind of right now, but it's also something, my sense, it's something that's been kind of escalating and growing for a while now, and it feels that there's many kind of issues that we're facing, both as communities, as society, as a civilization, that are issues that are kind of converging. And I think for me, kind of food is quite a key thing within that. So obviously we have things like obviously climate change, kind of soil depletion, what industrial agriculture is doing to our oceans, and then if you look at also on a citywide scale, or thinking about the cost of living crisis, food poverty, people alienated from their communities, social isolation, mental health. There's such a wide range of issues, and for me, like the whole thing about food somehow manages to, if it's done well, if it's done locally, sort of grassroots, then we can help address a lot of these issues. But in terms of thinking, particularly because it's one of those where it feels that we can help address many issues, and then we help address issues around food security and food sovereignty on a wider scale. And I think because a lot of these different issues, whether it's also resource depletion, and as well as combined with climate change and other things, that are potentially going to be having quite a bigger impact.
So that just emphasises the fact that, as you said as we were walking round, this is about not just the food element, it's about the bringing people together element. It's about addressing stereotypes between different communities. It's about exchanging skills and knowledge. It's the whole works really. But just on the food security issue in particular, what is the scale of the problem worldwide in terms of the risk to people suffering from, like climate change affecting poor harvests and so on, wars affecting people's access to food? I mean, how big is the problem, and is it imminent? Is it right? Is it here? How bad could it get?
I think, I mean, it's kind of I think it's variable across the world. I mean, I think for us, we kind of we're still at the stage where it's almost like a lifestyle choice, but there's a lot of complacency, whereas in other parts of the world, like you describe, whether it's to do with wars or whether it's to do with other kind of resource issues, the issue about food security is a lot more real and a lot more kind of imminent and a lot more kind of present. And I think it varies across from one place to another, but there's things that have kind of happened in the last few years where it's kind of made me think about how, because we're such a globalized system now economically and in terms of our access to resources, including food, is such a worldwide thing, and we're dependent on a huge sort of chain of actions of surplus kind of provision, which if there's any glitch, any issue along that chain, we'll suffer.
So there's no slack in the system,
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And it's scary sometimes how fragile things seem and how kind of I guess the opposite to resilient we are, and how we need to build that resilience. The fact that we need to be more doing kind of relocalizing how we live, relocalizing our economy, our food system, our energy systems, so then we're not so reliant on such kind of long distance and kind of these kind of mega structures and infrastructures. And again, if we can diversify and localize, then I think we'll be in a lot better place.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you talked about the problem of not much slack in the system and problems if your supply chain breaks down. But the fact is that on a local level, we're facing a cost of living crisis right now. So a lot of people, regardless of supply chains, are facing real hardship, aren't they, in terms of food, which is not dependent on, necessarily the oil price generally. It's dependent on the fact that they are really struggling and can't afford to pay their rent and other bills. And is that something that the other projects and this project, the Kushinga Project, and the other work that you're doing, is that foremost in your mind when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it very much so at the moment, and it's interesting because a few years ago when I started getting into this, it was a lot around thinking about climate change and the bigger problems and the bigger issues and sustainability and all the rest. But then, and it started now thinking about what your question is when COVID kicked in, is then we kind of turned around a lot of these projects about how can they help people during COVID to grow more food at home. And now, for example, we're seeing with the cost of living crisis, it is very much about some of the other projects, aiming to produce as much food so people can go away, both with skills to grow food at home, but also with lots of food. So again, for me, I find it fascinating how a lot of the solutions, the real sustainable solutions for the bigger problems that impose on us on a global level, are also solutions that we can think about for addressing the smaller scale, the things for people who, in a way, haven't got the privilege to think about the bigger problems that are very much on a survival thing, which I feel kind of luckily that I'm not in. And those things, whether, how to keep your home warm, they're things that people have been, teaching for the sake of climate change. Those are things that are now relevant for people, what they can do in the here and now to keep warm. Similar with food, growing your own food, people adopt it as a lifestyle choice because it's fun, because it's sustainable and all the rest, but because it makes sense, because you can save food, because you're more resilient, because you build skills, because it helps your mental health. So it's almost like the needs and the issues are completely connected, and the solutions are completely interconnected.
Indeed. And just talk to me about Mother Gardens that I noticed you've got on your beanie hat there, Felipe, but you've mentioned it also when we were walking around, because this is such an inventive way of addressing food sustainability issues, and it's sort of really draws on what plants are all about. So tell me about that particular project.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I'll start with giving you a bit of a background project, and just so you know where Mother Gardens came from. So I work for an organisation called Spring to Life, which focuses a lot around kind of well-being and mental health, but a lot of it was also focused about community well-being and the well-being of whole communities. And part of that was thinking about food security, and how communities can feed themselves. And for me, a number of years ago, I developed a project called Food Forest Brum. And the idea essentially was to thinking about, with the idea of food security and food sovereignty in my mind, is how can we make use of public spaces, of which there are many in Birmingham, and how can we make use of the initiative and the interests of local communities, bring those together with the public spaces, and to grow as many what we call perennial food landscapes. So anything, basically as many fruit and nut trees around as possible, as food forests, places where you can grow perennial foods. So then it's not just about how we feed ourselves in the here and now, which is great. Obviously, we can grow our own veg. Annual veg is really important. It's really good. But also what we can do long term for our own sustainability. So then if we plant fruit trees in areas, they might not get looked after, but the trees will be growing and they will be yielding a harvest for many, many years to come. And for example, planting nut trees, again, some nut trees won't give you a harvest until 20-25 years, but again, it's what we see for the food security of people in the future. So we were doing this for a couple of years, this project called Food Forest Brum, and the way it was working is that we were having to get grants in order to buy more trees, to do more of the work, to buy more fruit shrubs and all the rest. And then basically I thought, okay, how can we do it so then communities themselves can propagate their own plants? And that's where I came up with the idea of a mother garden. And essentially mother garden comes from the term mother plant. So mother plant being any plant which is a stock plant from which you can take cuttings that you can create baby plants essentially. Right. So then I thought, okay, it'd be nice if you could do a garden of mother plants, i.e. a mother garden. And essentially a mother garden is basically now our definition is a garden that helps create new gardens through the propagation and sharing of plants, seeds, resources, and also skills. And I'll talk about skills in a minute in terms of my work at the moment at Faircroft College. But essentially, a mother garden. So this Kushinga garden here, it was the first official mother garden. And we did that we had, like I showed you, the African kale. We've propagated hundreds and hundreds of times one African kale here. And then that's been shared across the city to other projects, and those projects have propagated them hundreds and hundreds of times. And I mean, I'd love to see how many projects and gardeners and individuals across the city have now this African kale. And it's basically, that's the principle, is very much tapping into the abundance that exists naturally in nature. Yeah. So, from a single plant, you can get, hundreds of thousands of seeds, for example. You can, that there's the amazing abundance that exists in nature. And the idea is that we can tap into that and use that as a resource and also as almost currency. And it's not just currency, so you can exchange and barter, and that we do a lot of that. So plant swap days, plant share days, seed swap days. But it's also how we can also cultivate a culture of sharing, how we can cultivate a sense of, I give something to my community, to a project, and then people feel more willing to be able to share back. And then, because the ethos is very much around growing food and propagating food plants, then basically we can raise that level of how much scope a community can feed itself through creating a network of different mother gardens within an area. So you might get a particular area where you already have, there's some areas that we wanted to develop, like Ladywood, for example. They're doing amazing work, and Ladywood and North Edgbaston, they're doing amazing work of a network of schools, of community gardens, of grow sites, of public planters, where some of them will be kind of propagating plants, other areas will be growing plants as a demonstration. Again, like the idea of a mother garden is also for inspiration, so you can create a new garden by inspiring people as well. And then that in itself, Ladywood, is now kind of almost like a network, almost like a village of mother garden sites that cross-pollinate, that connect with one another. The different sites might have different functions that kind of share and connect. And then basically with that in mind, some mother gardens will be growing, will have the stock plants, so you have your mother plants. Other mother gardens, like what we're doing at Faircroft College, We have stock plants, but we also, it's like a nursery as well. So that, essentially a mother garden can also be a nursery. Some mother gardens, for example, this one here, we had it as a space where we healed in many fruit trees. So during the food forest Brum period, we used this garden to maintain, to keep during the winter season hundreds and hundreds of fruit trees, which would then get planted out into public spaces. So basically, the idea of the mother garden, it will have different functions, both what I call eco-social functions. So it'll have eco functions in terms of being able to propagate more plants to create more biomass for spaces, for more woodland spaces, for more edible forests and whatnot. But it'll also have the social function. So we created a few years ago, based again from Kushinga, a project called Gaining Ground. And that was a mother garden project with the aim of connecting refugees and asylum seekers to different mother gardens in their own communities or within other communities. So we some people, a lot of people, for example, in Handsworth, so we connected a lot of people in Handsworth projects, and it was amazing because now we have quite a few Handsworth projects, Handsworth community gardens, separate from us, who are mother gardens, and who have load of African Kale, who are then sharing it to their local communities. So again, like what you're saying about the cross fertilization and cross pollination is a really quite important kind of thing as part of it. And then obviously, like I said earlier, is the sharing of skills, and that obviously when you empower a community to hold the skills, to develop skills, you can create new projects and new gardens. And that's the work that I've been doing in the last year, where for anyone interested, you can train up in a lot of these skills around the model of the philosophy of mother gardens on propagation, fruit tree grafting, how to design your forest garden, basics of food cultivation within a single course that we run at Furcroft. And the course is called Mother Gardens Boot Camp, and it's a free course, free of charge, but the only requirement is that it's a residential weekend, so one weekend a month. And then within that program between spring and summer, you can learn all these skills. And the idea is that we're almost like we're propagating food activists. I think that's probably one way of seeing it, is that we're trying to create as many people who've got those skills and who might already have a huge amount of skills and also a lot of passion. And it's basically trying to get them connected to projects, getting the projects to benefit from their what they can bring as well.
That is fantastic, and I was just thinking of a few people that would love to become food activists, and this is free. So you're leading a course in Furcroft College, which is a college in Birmingham. It's very much geared towards older learners, not the traditional learner as I recall. Basically everybody's welcome in Furcroft, which is a brilliant philosophy. And so you are imparting your skills that I've been fortunate enough to get a taste of today. So all of this knowledge from different cultures around growing and the ways of growing, the ways of people working together, that's all going to be shared on this course at Furcroft College. So get in touch, people, if you're interested in becoming a food activist, and you live in Birmingham, I should imagine.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Brummies, we're so lucky. So, well, it's been so interesting talking to you, Felipe. Really, I mean, you sound like an incredibly busy person, and we're incredibly fortunate to have you doing all of this fantastic stuff around food and sustainability and bringing people together in Birmingham. So thank you for inviting me to talk to you. I've loved it.
I appreciate it. You're welcome, and really thank you as well for letting me have the voice, and it's great what you're doing as well, giving a voice to projects as well, so really appreciated.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, if you've enjoyed listening to Felipe, then please do also check out some of my other videos on Communikarma, and do consider subscribing. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon with some more Communikarma. Thank you.